Welcome to the deep dive. We cut through the noise to get you the essential insights. Today, we're plunging into something that, well, it really exploded online recently. These alleged discoveries of huge, mysterious structures buried like kilometers deep beneath the Giza pyramids. You probably saw the headlines, right? The viral computer images. Things looking like energy generators, maybe alien depots, secret libraries even. The public excitement was just off the charts. So our mission today is to give you a shortcut to understanding this whole thing. First, we're going to unpack the controversy around these frankly incredible claims. Separate the fact from the fascinating fiction that took hold. Then we'll dive deeper, looking at the interdisciplinary roots of why ancient Egypt, especially the pyramids, holds such an enduring, almost obsessive grip on the Western imagination. It's a long history. And finally, we'll explore some really fascinating, often overlooked bits of Egyptian history that, challenge the main story we usually get. Okay, so let's dig into the specifics of these claims. Pretty extraordinary stuff.
Back in March 2025, two researchers, Filippo Biondi from Strathclyde and Corrado Malanga from Pisa, they made some pretty big announcements. They claimed our radar tech, synthetic aperture radar, or SAR, had found structures up to 2 kilometers deep under the Giza plateau. 2 kilometers. And they released these computer reconstructed 3D images to back it up. You saw them. 8 big cylindrical columns, like 60 meters deep, massive slabs below, even spiraling tubes around the columns. You can imagine, right? This sparked immediate media frenzy, huge speculation, aliens, lost super technology, all that stuff.
Yeah, well, the moment I saw those raw images, my first reaction, actually, as someone who works with radiology, was, this looks like a classic Doppler artifact. It's something, we see quite often in medical ultrasound. When you're imaging through areas with very different densities close together, like, say, a solid organ next to an air-filled space like your intestine, the ultrasound waves can create reflections, echoes that look like deeper structures, mirages, basically. They aren't really there.
So right from the start, your background gave you pause, a bit of a red flag.
A huge red flag, absolutely. And the wider scientific community, they were right there too, raising serious doubts almost immediately. Most Egyptologists, archaeologists, geologists, they questioned whether SAR could even penetrate that deep. 2 kilometers is, well, it's a massive depth for that technology. Critics also pointed out that those slick, computer-generated 3D images that went viral, they're largely, let's be honest, fantasy. They didn't cleanly follow the actual raw, messy data. And then there's the paper itself, published back in 2022 in a journal with a bit of a reputation for a pay-to-publish model. And it seemed to lack really robust peer review. Egyptian archaeologists specifically said, look, a 30-page paper like this, it just couldn't have been properly vetted and published in only 6 weeks. That timeline seemed off.
Yeah, 6 weeks is fast. What was the official word from Egypt itself? Any reaction?
Oh, yeah. Zahi Hawass, the famous Egyptian archaeologist, former minister of Antiquities, he was absolutely scathing. He called it fake news, point blank. He highlighted that neither researcher actually had a background in archaeology, geology, or Egyptology. One studied physics, the other chemistry. And crucially, neither had apparently ever even set foot in Egypt.
Oh, okay.
So the bottom line is these reported discoveries, they look highly comparable to those known artifacts or mirages from Doppler-type tech. It's very likely, I think, that the images came from reflections off existing, much shallower hollow spaces, maybe natural springs, near-surface cavities, that sort of thing. These reflections just created the illusion of something deep and complex.
It's just incredible, though, how quickly those claims spread, even after the scientific pushback. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Why are we collectively so ready to believe these kinds of stories about Egypt? Hidden secrets under the pyramids. It points to something deeper, I think. A pre-existing fascination, maybe even obsession with ancient Egypt. This whole thing, this intense Western focus, it even has a name, right? Egyptomania or Egyptophilia. And it's definitely not new. So this isn't just, a 20th century Hollywood thing. This fascination goes back much, much further.
Oh, way further back, much further. It actually dates right back to ancient Greece. You have historians like Herodotus, 5th century BCE, writing about the wonders of Egypt. The Greeks even tried to equate their own gods with Egyptian deities, they saw parallels. Diodorus, later on, 1st century BCE, literally called Egypt the fountain or source of all wisdom. Think about it. Greek thinkers, mathematicians like Thales, Pythagoras, they were believed to have traveled to Egypt to learn geometry from the temple priests. For them, Egypt was kind of the old world, the source of deep knowledge, almost like how, say, 20th century Americans might have looked towards Europe for cultural depth. And then, of course, Egypt features significantly in the Torah and the Bible, stories of Abraham, Joseph, Mary traveling there. It's woven into the very fabric of Western religious narratives. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, you see how environment and culture get tangled up. Egypt's climate, especially outside the Nile Valley, is incredibly dry. Think the Valley of the Dead. It naturally preserved things that would decay almost anywhere else. Bodies, yes, but also artifacts made of skin, wool, wood. You just couldn't preserve a mummy like that in, say, Central America's jungles.
Right. The climate was key.
Exactly. And this natural preservation then perfectly merged with the Egyptians' own profound obsession with physical immortality, bodily resurrection. They genuinely believed preserving the body and everything with it, even toys for children, mummified pets, was absolutely crucial for a good afterlife.
That's a really unique convergence of factors.
It really is. And the landscape itself played a role. Nikos Kazantzakis, the Greek writer, Zorba the Greek, he wrote beautifully about that stark boundary between the lush green, vibrant Nile Valley life and the terrifying barren desert right next to it, death. That contrast gripped the Egyptians, fueled that drive for immortality, and it still captivates us today. You see it visually, too. The organic, flowing shapes and soft colors of the desert dunes. Then, bam! The monumental, sharp-angled, rectangular stone blocks of the pyramids. Perfect triangles against the curves. Even the hieroglyphs, angular, sharp, bold colors, often contained in neat frames, almost like scenes on a film roll.
Like order imposed on chaos.
Precisely. It's almost like a philosophical tension made visible. Platonic aesthetics, a flowing beauty of nature clashing with Aristotelian rational thought, the logical, structured construction. The pyramids stand like these Aristotelian objects planted firmly on a Platonic landscape. Apollonian order asserting itself over Dionysian chaos. It hits you on a deep level when you see it. And the West, which tends to identify itself as rational, Aristotelian. Well, it unconsciously sees the pyramids as ancient proof of that rational order existing even way back then in what it perceives as the East.
That's fascinating. And you mentioned a parallel to modern obsessions.
Yeah, look at the modern West's focus on physical preservation, cryopreservation, Botox, anti-aging. It's kind of a modern echo of the ancient Egyptian pursuit of physical immortality. This contrasts pretty sharply with many Eastern philosophies, which often emphasize non-physical immortality. Think of Tibetan sand mandalas, created then destroyed, or the idea that a good name lives on. So, in a way, the West sees a reflection of its own long-standing values in ancient Egypt's focus on the physical body surviving death.
So this thread, this fascination, it runs through history. But how did it keep resurfacing? It wasn't constant, was it?
No, it ebbed and flowed. After Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 BCE, it became Hellenistic, then Roman after Cleopatra. During this time, this figure, Hermes Trismegistus, maybe legendary, maybe real, emerged. He was seen as this master of three disciplines: alchemy, science, philosophy, a key source for Western esoteric traditions. But then, after the Muslim conquest in the 7th century, direct Western contact pretty much dried up for a long time. During the medieval period, Egypt became more like a land of fantasy in Europe. Pyramids were thought to be Joseph's granaries from the Bible. Mummies were ground up into a powder called mumia and used as medicine. A lot of actual knowledge was lost, replaced by superstition.
Wow, mummy medicine. That's something. A real shift from the source of wisdom idea.
A huge shift. But then came the Renaissance, 15th to 17th centuries. Interest was rekindled. Ancient texts attributed to Egypt, like the Corpus Hermeticum, translated by Ficino around 1460, brought Egypt back into focus as the source of esoteric knowledge, alchemy, which really took off then. Move forward to the Enlightenment, the 18th century. Now, Egypt wasn't just mystical, it was seen as the ancient root of Western rationalism itself. Thinkers embraced it. Secret societies like the Freemasons adopted Egyptian symbols. Egyptian style became trendy in aristocratic homes. Then comes Napoleon, late 18th, early 19th century. His invasion, 1799-1801, wasn't just military. It led to a massive transfer of artifacts, mummies, obelisks back to Europe, trophies of victory. But the biggest thing, the Rosetta Stone was found. This allowed Champollion to finally decipher hieroglyphs in 1822. That unlocked ancient Egyptian texts, basically birthed modern Egyptology as a science. And that kicked off a massive wave of Egyptomania. European museums rushed to fill their halls, often through colonial acquisitions. Egyptian themes were everywhere in art and literature.
So intertwined with discovery, there's this strong element of colonialism and power dynamics.
Absolutely. And geopolitics, too. From the 19th century on, Egypt's location, especially after the Suez Canal opened in 1869, made it incredibly strategic. Lots of conflict over control. Fast forward to the 1920s. Howard Carter, British-funded, finds Tutankhamun's tomb untouched. It wasn't just archaeology, it was a global sensation. Mania. It influenced Art Deco design, jewelry, fashion, even the first Hollywood mummy movies. But importantly, during this frenzy, Egyptians themselves had very little say over their own heritage. Europeans were largely running the show.
A familiar story in archaeology, unfortunately.
Yes.
Then, mid-century, 1956, you have the Suez Crisis. Nasser nationalizes the canal. That event really signaled the decline of the old European colonial powers. Later in the 60s, Western involvement came back, partly through things like funding the Aswan Dam project, which involved that huge effort to save monuments like Abu Simbel, that sort of rekindled Western influence in the Romantic narratives. And the 60s also brought something else, the rise of ancient astronaut theories. Erich von Däniken's Chariots of the Gods in 68, explicitly linking the pyramids to aliens. It tapped into the zeitgeist, right? Psychedelics, the space race, this tendency to connect disparate, mysterious things. You even saw Egyptian and alien motifs on album covers.
Right, I remember some of those. And the fascination continued. Big Tutankhamun exhibitions toured the world in the 70s, drawing millions. Hollywood kept churning out mummy movies. More recently, the 21st century. The 2011 Arab Spring raised geopolitical concerns, briefly limited access for archaeologists. Then in 2022, Egypt celebrated 200 years since deciphering hieroglyphs. And they launched major campaigns to get artifacts back, like the Rosetta Stone, the Nefertiti bust. It reflects a growing desire by Egyptians to control their own story, their own narrative, which connects back to figures like Zahi Hawass pushing back against fake news discoveries.
It's clear this Western obsession is complex, historical, cultural, psychological. But you mentioned Egypt's story isn't just about our fascination. There are other narratives, often hidden or ignored. And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. Beyond the pharaohs and pyramids, Egypt has these incredibly rich, overlooked histories. It was always this multicultural crossroads, right? Interacting with Greece, Africa, the East, a place where diverse ideas met and mingled. But that role often gets lost behind the giant stone monuments.
Exactly. And it raises that question. Why the intense focus on just one slice of Egypt's long history? Again, that dry climate comes into play. It preserved paper, papyrus, not just bodies. Egyptians buried books. But texts were also deliberately hidden, especially during times of suppression. And this leads us to early Christianity. Within decades of Jesus' life, a very distinct form of Christian thought emerged and flourished in Egypt. Gnostic Christianity or Gnosticism. Early monasteries, schools popped up there, dedicated to writing and copying texts based on this Gnostic understanding. Gnosticism was mystical. It saw humans as sparks of light trapped in matter. It embraced this duality, good versus evil, light versus dark, influenced by older traditions like Zoroastrianism. Jesus, in this view, was a revolutionary figure come to liberate the soul from materialism.
So a very different take compared to what became the dominant form of Christianity.
Fundamentally different, yeah. And when the early Roman Church started organizing and defining its beliefs, culminating in the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, they established orthodoxy and fiercely condemned Gnosticism as heresy. So for almost 2,000 years, almost everything the West knew about Gnosticism came from the writings against it, written by its opponents. We were only getting one very hostile side of the story.
Wow. So for centuries, the actual Gnostic perspective was lost.
Largely lost, yes, until 1945. That's when everything changed. A local farmer near Nag Hammadi in Egypt stumbled upon a buried jar. Inside, a whole library of original Gnostic texts. 52 books written in Coptic, that's the Egyptian language using a Greek-based alphabet. It was momentous. These were the actual writings, not condemnations. Now, the initial story was they were hidden during persecutions. Later, some argued maybe they were just common tomb finds, perhaps trying to downplay their significance against official church history. Though it is interesting that no similar Gnostic texts had turned up in previous scientific digs.
What kind of texts were they?
Some incredible stuff. The Gospel of Thomas, a collection of 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, some familiar, some very different. The Gospel of Philip, which talks about Jesus' relationship with Mary Magdalene in a much more mystical, almost Sufi-like way. The Gospel of Truth, a Gnostic text, seeing Jesus as an envoy, leading people from ignorance to wisdom. And maybe most startling, the Apocryphon of John, or the Secret Book of John. It presents a completely different creation myth than Genesis, even portraying the God of the Old Testament as, well, a lesser divine being.
That's radically different. It must reshape how we see early Christian diversity.
Absolutely. Finding these texts hidden away in Egypt, it's like finding a missing link. It connects early, perhaps more revolutionary forms of Christianity, which definitely clashed with Roman power and parts of the Old Testament narrative to Eastern philosophical traditions. There's a famous Gnostic story, the Hymn of the Pearl. It's about a prince sent to Egypt to find a pearl. He gets distracted, forgets his mission, but is eventually reminded and succeeds. You could see that as a metaphor, maybe, for these Gnostic texts themselves, the Pearl of Wisdom, buried under the dominant story of sphinxes and pharaohs. Even later, medieval Islamic philosophers like Ibn Sina and Sohrawardi, whose ideas resonate with Gnostic mysticism, they metaphorically called Egypt part of the West, the place where the sun sets, a place of hidden wisdom. And today, there's a huge resurgence of interest in Gnostic ideas. You see it all over YouTube.
So the theory is maybe the focus on the pyramids is safer.
It's one theory, yeah. Focusing intensely on the 4,500-year-old pharaonic story might offer a safe narrative. It avoids engaging with other parts of Egyptian history, like Gnosticism, that could potentially challenge established religious or historical accounts like the official Gospels or the Torah.
That's a really provocative thought. Are there other major chapters of Egyptian history that get similarly overshadowed?
Oh, definitely. Another huge one is the Fatimid Caliphate. They ruled Egypt and a vast swath of North Africa and the Middle East for over 2 centuries, from 909 to 1171 CE. This was the first major Shia dynasty, specifically Ismaili Shia, in the heartland of the Islamic world. They controlled territory from North Africa right across to Syria, Palestine, the Hijaz with Mecca and Medina, even parts of Nubia and Yemen. Immense reach. Yet despite ruling for over 200 years, their legacy in Egypt is often barely mentioned, again, overshadowed by the pyramids.
What were they known for?
They were actually known for being remarkably tolerant, religiously speaking. They actively encouraged arts, philosophy. They founded the city of Cairo itself. And they established the great Al-Azhar University back in 970 CE, still a major center of learning today. The historian Will Durant wrote this amazing description. He claimed you could ride a horse from the Red Sea all the way across North Africa to Gibraltar and never leave the shade of the palm trees the Fatimids had planted. Shows their level of development. They were eventually overthrown by Saladin, the famous Sunni leader, in 1171. But it's just another example of a rich, complex, influential period of Egyptian history that gets pushed to the margins by the sheer weight of the pharaonic narrative.
So we've really covered a lot of ground here. From the recent Giza controversy back through millennia fascination and into these overlooked histories like Gnosticism and the Fatimids.
And
it's clear Egypt's hold on our imagination is incredibly multifaceted. And the story of Egypt is far richer than just the headlines or the standard museum tour.
absolutely. What really stands out, I think, is that Egypt is so much more than mummies and pyramids. It's always been this geopolitically vital place, a crossroads, a battleground for competing ideas from East and West. It's a place where deep spirituality met raw power, and where apparently forgotten texts can still emerge from the sand to challenge the stories we thought we knew.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to take away.
Well, maybe think about this. In times of global stress, like we're facing now with climate change and other crises, there might be this unconscious human tendency to look for outside saviors, whether that's aliens or discovering some lost super technology hidden under the pyramids. It's maybe not so different psychologically from hoping we can escape to Mars, like Elon Musk envisions. So perhaps this enduring fascination with finding hidden secrets in Egypt, especially under the pyramids, also reflects a deeper collective hope for some kind of external fix for our very modern problems. So as you encounter these stories, these discoveries, maybe keep an open mind, use that divergent thinking. Look beyond just the surface story and consider all the layers, the history, the psychology, the motivations behind why these narratives take hold. There's always more beneath the surface.